Chapter 8. This chapter contains images. If you can't see the chapter content, please enable the image display mode of your browser to read. The little girl raised her head and stared at the doorknob. The surroundings fell into silence, so quiet that you could hear her breathing. A few seconds later, she took 2 steps back without hesitation and ran downstairs to the living room. "Mom, maybe we should find an exorcist priest." The little girl stood in front of her parents, raised her big, wet eyes, and said seriously, "Esther is a murderer. I think the room she stayed in must be unlucky. Maybe we need a priest. Otherwise I won't be able to sleep in the future." Kelson smiled helplessly, and affectionately patted her head. "Of course, my little princess. After all, discovering Esther's secret is your credit. I will make you feel at ease. Dad, remember to find the priests of those big churches." Siddle also gave serious instructions. Her small hands behind her back crumpled the paper from earlier, and threw it into the trash can. "Don't look for those imposters." Because today was Monday, Siddle was supposed to go to school. But she used the excuse of being scared by Esther to easily get the privilege of asking her parents to take a day off. It seemed that Kelson took Siddle's request very seriously. Not long after that he went to the church he usually went to pray at, and successfully brought back a man wearing a long black robe, with a silver cross necklace around his neck. Because of his white hair, one could tell at a glance that he was a highly respected priest. Siddle happily ran over to greet him, hinting that there was something unusual in Esther's room, an evil spirit. "Sometimes, I always feel like that doll has a soul, it's staring at me." Siddle tried to tactfully increase Annabelle's intimidation in the priest's eyes. Ray opened the door. "We hope you can purify this room. I think my husband has told you everything, right? A serial killer just moved out of this room a few hours ago." "Madam, I know." The priest nodded to Ray and Kelson, made a cross with both hands, placed the silver cross on his chest and began to pray. His speech speed gradually increased. Siddle, who had never prayed in church before, tried her best to only understand the first sentence, "May God protect us." After that, she could only raise her head in confusion, as if she was listening to a book of heaven, placing her hope in this elderly priest who looked very respected. A few minutes later, the priest put down the cross, smiled and looked at the Kelson family. "Everyone is very lucky. There are no evil spirits in this room, and that murderer did not leave anything wrong here." Siddle. She stared blankly at the priest, and the silhouette of the little girl in a white dress standing in front of the window with her back to them. The little girl slowly turned her head. Literally turning her head 180 degrees towards the door, her beautiful face devoid of any blood stared at Siddle indifferently. Siddle even heard the creaking sound when the little girl turned her head. "Father," she muttered, "didn't you agree with me to find a priest with real power, not to find some swindler?" "Siddle." Kelson frowned and shouted, "How can you be so disrespectful to Father Anderson? He is a highly respected elder at St. Peter's Church, and his exorcism ability is extraordinary." Father Anderson obviously didn't care about the little girl's rudeness. He smiled kindly and shook his head. "It's okay, it's just a child's words. The little girl might be too scared, but there really is no evil spirit in this room." Siddle looked at him dumbfounded, not daring to believe it. Damn it, he turned around and looked to see if he could still say such rubbish. The little girl in front of the window curled her lips in a contemptuous smile. Her snow-white legs were suddenly lengthened, her body bent slightly forward, her arms also slowly lengthened, her bones rubbed together making a rustling sound. The short white skirt was now barely considered a miniskirt, her pale skin turned ashen, her face transformed into a monster, her entire body was supported by a skeleton. At this moment, that monster was slowly swaying towards the priest. Extraordinary ability. Siddle's face was expressionless. Never before had she felt so speechless. The only lucky thing now was that because the priest had to exorcise, she and her parents were standing in front of the door in the hallway. It was easy to escape. The monster behind the ink priest reached out, its 5 long gray fingers grabbed the priest's neck, leaving a gray handprint. Just when Siddle thought the monster would take another step, it suddenly retracted its hand, transformed into a little girl, looked at Siddle with a disdainful smile, and disappeared. Kelson and Ray gratefully sent the respected and powerful priest Anderson out the door. Siddle stood to the side and watched. The scene before her eyes was very similar to her previous life when the president made a secret inspection. She coldly watched Kelson send the priest off, but even after he left, the gray handprint on her neck had not disappeared. Inviting the priest was useless. Siddle could only personally go into battle. She ran upstairs, went into Esther's room, and picked up Annabelle on the ground. There were faint footprints on the doll's face, her braids were disheveled, and her clothes were covered in blood. Siddle stood still, wiping the dust off Annabelle's face, then unbraided her hair, rebraided her hair, and adjusted her clothes. The best way to get rid of fear is to face it head-on. Siddle decided to live peacefully with Annabelle. After all, the old saying goes, if you can't beat her, it's best to be friends. That's if Annabelle agrees. She sat on the bed and held Annabelle up high, but after a moment of contemplation, she couldn't say anything. She didn't have social phobia, she just didn't know how to talk to a 7-year-old little girl. At school, because of her strong personality, she became the boss, and with more than 10 years of life experience in her previous life, it was normal for a group of children to worship her. But now Annabelle was the boss. After a while, Siddle choked up, and could only silently stroke the hair on top of the doll's head, looking into its dusty gray-blue eyes. You're very beautiful, but if you want to be loved by everyone, you have to be a good child, understand? The doll still didn't move, there was no reaction in her hand. Siddle sighed tiredly, thinking that she couldn't just throw this toy here. She didn't know if it would come out if she threw it in the basement, for now she could only leave it on the swing in her room. Strangely, after putting the doll on the swing started to move slowly. Siddle, staring at JPG. She stood there silently for a while, and found that the swing was still moving by itself, just at a very small amplitude. It seemed that Annabelle was very satisfied with this new room. Before that, Siddle had only found one news article about Annabelle Higgins online. The general content was that there was a couple who made carpets in their house. The husband was a famous doll maker. They had a daughter named Annabelle Higgins. When Annabelle was 7 years old, she accidentally died in a car accident. The couple suffered a blow and from then on lived in seclusion at home. The husband even gave up his job and stopped making dolls. He gradually disappeared. The couple missed their daughter so much that they wanted to make a substitute, and in the process, they even performed some evil rituals. Obviously, they played with fire. They were bitten back by the evil doll they created. This couple could only taste the bitter fruit they created. And conveniently throw this bitter fruit to her. Thinking back to those things, Siddle could only sigh, and then think of that Miss Pearl Joyce, feeling that she was really lucky. She was clearly looking for her own death, and she could even unintentionally throw the consequences onto someone else. This fate really defies the will of heaven. If it were in a horror movie, it would be the type of role that would at least live to the end of the movie. She closed the door and went out, seeing that Father Kelson had returned from the church. Siddle was mentally prepared to be criticized, but unexpectedly Kelson did not say anything, but pulled her and Ray to the living room, his expression serious. He thought for a long time and said, "There is something I have been meaning to say for a long time. Last month, my uncle contacted me. Ray, you should remember that he is a famous millionaire in Massachusetts. He owns a luxurious hotel, although the location is a bit far, but it is very quiet there. I don't know why, but he hopes you can help him manage that hotel temporarily. Would you two agree to go up to the mountains with me? It's cool and quiet there. I think it's not a bad place for a summer vacation." Kelson's light brown eyes looked sincerely at Siddle and his wife. "I think it's a good place." He tensed slightly, trying to choose his words. After our family just went through something like that, maybe we should go out into nature to relax a bit." "Oh." Ray was a little surprised. "I don't have any objections, but Siddle will probably have to transfer schools." Siddle saw her old father's sincere eyes and understood that he probably thought that she was being rude to the priest because she was scared by Esther. Kelson was the one who adopted Esther, so he felt guilty, perhaps even afraid that this might be the reason for his daughter to form a psychological shadow. He wanted to take his wife and children away from here, at least to forget the unpleasant memories Esther brought. I don't mind transferring schools, Dad. Siddle blinked a few times, her eyes were as bright as jade underwater, as clear as if she could see through everything. She replied sincerely, moreover, there are still a few days left of summer vacation, maybe we can come back before the start of school. Kelson received the agreement of his wife and children, and breathed a sigh of relief as he sat on the sofa. Hee, I promise you too, he smiled and said, we will have the best summer vacation ever.